Hey everyone, what's up? Welcome back. Force here, got a special video for you today. We're going to be taking an early look at this upcoming game called Sea of Remnants. This is called an ocean adventure RPG. You play as this puppet folk sailor, traversing the deadly seas, battling fantasy creatures, and building a fleet of companions that will aid you in your journey. The game definitely has a very unique presentation and world to it. You got some really interesting features in here as well. Now, I got to play a preview build of the game, checking out the first few hours, and today I'm going to be sharing with you a bit of what I saw in that experience. Now, a big thank you to Joker Studios for the opportunity, as well as for sponsoring today's video. If you guys do enjoy what you see here today, you can learn more about the game using the link in the description below. And with that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right into the video and check out Sea of Remnants. So the game kicks off with a pretty eye-catching introduction. You awake in a boat and must row across the quiet sea towards this pillar of light in the distance. In the process, you're moving through this nice looking environment surrounded by these ethereal creatures and spirits of other sailors and seafaring folk. And this is where you're giving an introduction to some of the game's narrative with a few bits of dialogue and a big cutscene. It was a pretty neat introduction, like a really nice sort of serene environment with some intense moments in the cutscene that pursues, but I won't spoil the story here. Now, after that, some time passes and you find yourself waking up in the workshop of Sigmund. Here you are asked to recall some memories and tell them who you are. Enter the game's character creation. So once more, you play as this puppet folk, which is pretty much exactly what you would assume. You are essentially a marionette doll come to life. You'll select from an assortment of pre-created options, choosing from different wood types for your body, and then the look of your character's head. I went with the fish for a helmet guy, just kind of funny, I don't know. Now, even from the start here, again, I must say this game has this very distinct style to it. Just like a rather unique presentation, these marionette doll characters that you play at and that the world is inhabited by. Now, after character creation, you are then directed around the game's major city. This is Orbtopia. Here you are introduced to several systems and mechanics in the process. You've got this compass at the top, which will point you to any nearby points of interest or quest objectives. As you're walking around the city, you'll find all sorts of interactable objects with bits of lore about the game world itself, along with various sort of collectibles. They've also got these things called memory files, kind of functions like the messaging system in, say, a Souls game, or Where Winds Meet is another game that did something similar, where players can leave messages out in the world for others to see and even comment on. They show up in-game as like these little floating purple bottles that you can interact with. Visually, the city of Orbtopia showcases the game's style, this mixture of nautical theming and then punk. And by punk, I mostly mean like there's spray paint graffiti all over the place, literally across the game. You're gonna see these splashes of color, various types of art and tagging all over the place, even on the characters themselves. My character has a big spray paint mark across his back at all times. But yeah, other than that, this is a very pirate-y seaside village. It's cute. It's a nice little environment, honestly. You can interact with most every character in the world from what I could tell. They will each have something to say should you choose to chat with them. And the city itself is made up of several named sections. Each of these come with their own NPCs and various activities that you can check out and engage with. While walking around, you also have this recon scan ability that you can use, and what this does is, like it sounds, it scans the environment and will highlight interactable objects and collectibles within your vicinity, and there's loads of these. In fact, treasure chests are scattered all about the place, and in which you're going to find various resources and currencies, which are used to kind of fuel some of the game's various progression systems. The game also has mantling as well, meaning you can pull yourself up to any objects that you can basically reach in the environment. This helps you explore around the space, which I did for some time, kind of just meandering around the city, checking out different stuff and looting chests in the process. After a bit of exploring, I headed to the center of town, where I was tasked with chasing down a troublesome chicken who stole my compass. That was kind of funny, and the game also implied that this chicken is going to be stealing stuff on a regular basis. You're going to have to deal with them. I then made my way into the town's bar, of course a sailor's favorite stomping ground, and here I was introduced to a few of the game's main characters with a lengthy, wacky cutscene. This game's got a lot of kind of LOL cutesy quirky stuff going on in it. This gave me an introduction as well after the cutscene with all sorts of shenanigans that took place. I was then introduced to the game's combat system, and this actually I wasn't expecting. This is a turn-based combat game, although you move through the environment in a third person behind the character camera perspective. When it comes to combat itself, you're moving into turn-based combat mode. It's got the typical structure with both you and your enemies, your team and your enemies being placed in an attack order, and then during every turn you will will have a certain number of actions that you can take, choosing from a variety of different offensive attacks, buffs, and defensive abilities that you could use. Now, in our first battle, this was against Whitebeard and his underlings. He was a little pissed off after our new lady friend kind of messed things up in his bar. Now, on my team was my character, and then this blonde puppet lady who we recently met has now gotten us into this mess, and we're going to be cooperating together with, at least for some short time. So after the enemies got their initial shots in, it was then our turn, and we started out using various combat skills. I had one called Fiery Ambition, which was a buff that granted me 4 stacks of vigor and increased my attack damage by 25% for 2 turns. That ability itself has a 3-turn cooldown, so if you've ever played a turn-based action game, you've got like buffs and various things that will have long cooldowns. You'll use those, and then you'll follow them up with shorter cooldowns, abilities that in between. So yeah, I start off with this big buff, increasing my damage, and then with my remaining AP, I swapped to my single target ability called Split Sword, which deals heavy damage to one enemy, further buffed by the Fiery Ambition I had just casted. Then with my new pal, I tossed some bottles, which were striking all enemies at once, and the turn order swapped back to the opponents, who launched a few of their attacks and applied several buffs to themselves. And this continued as turn-based games do, going back and forth using our skills until one of the two sides wins. Ideally, we're the ones who win. And I gotta say, for the game's very first combat encounter, this was far more in-depth than I expected. The fight itself lasted nearly 5 minutes, with a few big ultimate attacks in there as well, including my crewmate's skill called the Cutest Doll, which was a rocket launcher type ability that did a ton of damage to all enemies and also applied a 4-turn debuff. Pretty strong stuff. After combat, there was some more cutscene action where we escaped the bar and made our way out towards the docks. And here we were actually then introduced to the game's sailing system. However, before casting off, we took a little break to prepare a few things. First, we prepped some food, which involves this mini game of roasting veggies or whatever other type of food stuff you have over a fire until the item is cooked, and then consuming the food will give you health, but also grants some variety of buffs depending on the combination of foods that you put together on the skewer. I also opened this loot chest, or a briefcase to be exact, and this was kind of neat. You actually had to kind of shimmy this thing open, shaking it side to side with Q and E, and then when it physically popped open, you could highlight and click on the various contents within it. Inside, I found, well, there was a crab who wasn't too happy to be disturbed, but also there was a flag piece, a bottle, some bread, photos, a tiny treasure box, and then a map, which then we used to chart a course to our next objective. It was then time to set sail, so we hopped on the boat and cast out to sea. Sailing the ship itself is rather straightforward. You simply direct it with W, A, S, and D, or presumably with the thumbstick if you're playing on a controller, and this will move it forward, left, right, or back. Not too much complexity here in navigating of the ship, but there does appear to be some directional winds that may affect your speed, although I'm not exactly certain from what I've seen. While out on the first voyage, we had to blast some floating debris that was out in the ocean. You've got basically a crosshair that you can just point and shoot, which will fire your cannons. There is also an additional mode available, though, that lets you directly control the cannons manually and in first person, but it was recommended that we just use the mode that allows you to kind of shoot on the fly as you're also steering the ship, and then you will automatically collect whatever you blow up. It just automatically kind of put in your inventory. Now, upon arriving at our destination, it was time to drop the anchor and head ashore. This was a tiny little island where our first clue pointed us towards, so we sailed to the island. You go up to this marked anchor spot, and then you click a button which will have you go ashore. There's a transition cutscene, and then you arrive on the land. Now, on this island, we began kind of the first bit of what appears to be the game's gameplay loop, where you're going back and forth from the main city island that we started out in, Orbtopia, out to various other island locations where there's things that you're collecting, combat, all sorts of stuff, the various quests and side quests and activities, all of that. So we arrived on our first island here. Right at the shore, there was a little campfire where we could prepare some food and heal up before we set out. Also at these fires, there's a few other options. You can do a respite, which will revive any fainted crew members that happen to get down in combat. You can level up your crew, making them stronger in the process, and you can even adjust the squad, which will let you swap out members to other combinations. After a little brief rest, I then set out down a path which led me right into a combat encounter, and also introduced me to the fact that the game has a first strike system, where if you attack an enemy in the open world, hitting them first gives you an advantage when you then move into the turn-based combat. So you just spam left click, it does a basic attack, you hit them 3 times, and then you get this dice roll, which will determine the strength of the opener that you begin with. Also, another layer to combat are these enhancement dice dice, which are used specifically to boost up your path attacks, making them stronger. So it's just another layer of kind of randomness. You know, it's like a D20 roll, but not really. It's 3 dice that spin, and whatever you land on, that kind of will boost your attack that you're applying it towards. Following this first encounter on the island, we were rewarded with a piece of equipment, and this is kind of your typical, you're gonna get some gear, it will have stats on it that makes you stronger. After this fight, I found a headpiece that gave me attack power, crit rate, and bonus damage. Nice, I will take it. Kept on exploring the island, and in the process, a few things. We found a firefly lamp, which is used to light a path towards your various objectives, whatever quest that you're on. There were also all sorts of collectible resources, various herbs and plants, food, and other stuff. There were flowers that I could only collect while crouched, so if I walked up to them normally, couldn't interact with them, but if I snuck up to them, I was able to loot them. There's also tons of treasure chests all over the place with currencies and loot. Got into loads of different fights. There were these like pig-like creatures. Well, they were pigs, like they're marionette pigs inhabiting the island, so we fought a lot of those pigs. And then also got some more good gear as we progressed through various fights and loot chests, again, making us stronger. All of this culminated in a big boss battle against Mommy Warthog. This was an actually tougher fight. Like, she did a ton of area damage as well as buffing her side, her teammates, her little piglets, whatever. But also here we were introduced to a few new mechanics that helped us win the fight, including what are called finishers. It's basically this meter that builds up during combat, and once the meter is full, you can activate it immediately, and it's just gonna jump to, no matter where you are on the turn order, if that meter gets filled up, you can activate it, and then you get your special attack, your special finisher attack that pops off right away. So we got a couple of those, did a lot of damage, we won the fight against Mommy Warthog, and I got a purple sword upon winning this fight. As a fan of loot games and MMOs and all sorts of stuff, I like getting purple gear after winning fights, you know, so it's good. Made me stronger, perfect, boosting stats, wonderful. Also happened to find my first path art from opening a treasure chest just after the boss encounter. This let me select an additional combat skill from one of 3 different options. I went with the one called Fire Time. This was an attack that would deal damage and also grants a stacking buff, making you stronger the more you use it as the fights progress. After going around and gathering some more food and herbs, opening up a few more chests, I then head back to the boat, back out to sea towards our next objective. We sailed for a little bit, and then we arrived at a new island. This one was much smaller, but it had some stuff on it. There was an assortment of collectibles and treasures. I was also introduced on this island to sneak attacks, where striking certain enemies who are unaware will just one-shot them. So you won't actually engage in the turn-based combat mode. If you strike them unaware, they're just dead, just like that. Just a way of skipping the turn-based encounters versus some of these certain basic enemies. Towards the back end of the island, we came across this big ape boss called Gooya. This was another tougher fight. My attacks were barely moving his health bar. Now, after breaking his defenses and putting him in kind of this down state, the fight actually transitioned. So we had a cutscene, we then went back on our ship and went out, you know, we were sailing out, we thought, great, we dealt with him, now we're back out to sea. But then we meet him again. This time he's piloting a ship, and we engage in naval combat. So this was pretty cool. It was rather straightforward. I'm just pointing my cannons and shooting at him, and he's doing the same, trying to broadside without getting hit in return by his return fire, blasting away at each other. Eventually, I succeed. I sink his boat and get some nice loot as a reward in the process. And that basically wrapped up my time with the game, although a few more things I want to point out as I was kind of rooting around, checking out different systems. There's a whole crew management thing. One big part of this game is going to be collecting new characters to bring into your crew and then kind of mixing and matching them depending on their strengths and weaknesses. So you pick up a crew, these are characters you collect, and they're going to have them while you're setting out sailing or engaging in combat. In the beginning, it was just the character that I made and then our companion who went by the name RS. Now, as you play, you're going to eventually find and collect more. As far as I'm aware as well, this game is a gacha game, so there's going to be a gacha system of acquiring characters on top of that. And then there's power progression that happens via crew training, where you can spend points to upgrade various offensive and defensive stats and abilities. I didn't go far enough to be able to actually see this aspect of the game in action. Again, I played for a few hours in my preview, and it was just me and RS, so we'll have to keep an eye out as we get to play more to see exactly how the system is implemented. There's a storage where it's basically your inventory. There's also an appearance cosmetic section where you will unlock various cosmetics for your character and your crew. And then there was this whole diary system where it's basically just a list of everything you've discovered and all the unlockables that you have found. sound. But yeah, that pretty much does it for my preview of Sea of Remnants. Hopefully this gives you guys a nice kind of introductory look at what this game is all about. I will say I'm definitely intrigued enough from what I've seen, having enjoyed some turn-based combat in the past, and the not too distant past even, and this seems like a pretty decent implementation of that. I also really like the setting and the theming, and the game does have its own unique spin with these puppet folk people and just the environment and theming and this punk element, which is just a bunch of like spray paint neon colors and stuff. But I don't know, pretty cool. I had a fun enough time with it, and again, hopefully this gives you a good clear picture of what the game is all about, at least initially. I'll keep an eye out and likely we'll jump back in and cover this game again in the future as well. But that is all for today. Once again, if you guys are interested, if you like what you see, we got links below. Check those out. Otherwise, that does it for now. Thank you for watching as always. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Take it easy, guys.